Hello and welcome to our Rashi class. We are in parsha Tzav, which is the parsha of the coming week, and as has been our practice this year, we're looking at the third Aliyah, Shlishi, which begins in chapter 7, verse 11. And I was very excited when I was preparing this shiur, this little class, that in fact it's very relevant to the upcoming festival of Pesach, as we shall see. So I think we shall read the first three verses of the Aliyah, and then we'll look at the Rashis, and then we'll go further after that. So this is how the Aliyah begins. V'zos Toras Zevach Hashlamim. This is the Torah, this is the law, this is the teaching of the offering, the Zevach Hashlamim, which is a Shlamim is from the word Shalom, which means peace or completeness. So this is the type of offering which was called a peace offering or a total offering, a complete offering. Asher Yakriv Lashem, which may be brought to God or for God. Im al Toda Yakrivenu, if it's brought. Now this phrase is interesting. Al Toda could mean obviously literally on the Toda. Toda means thank you. So we have an indication there's another type of offering or another type of function which is going on here, a type of thanksgiving. So if it's brought on the Thanksgiving, or let's say for Thanksgiving, V'kriv al zevach hatoda, it shall be, then he shall offer it with the sacrifice of thanksgiving. Chalos matzos bululos bashemen. Along with this Thanksgiving offering will come along matzos, cakes of matzah, abulos bashemen, mingled with oil, urikike matzos, and unleavened wafers, meshuchim bashamen, which are spread with oil, v'soles murbeches, and fine flour, which is murbeches, that's a word that Rashi will be interested in, chalos, made into cakes, belos bashemen, again mingled with oil. And then a final verse we look at the Rashis. Al chalos lechem chometz yakriv korbano, along with not just matzah, different types of matzah, different types of unleavened bread, but also leavened bread, chometz, he shall bring his offering. Al zevach todas shalomov, along with the sacrifice of his, and now we have not a two different words, totally separated, shlomim, the thanksgiving, the peace offering, the complete offering, and todah, the thanksgiving offering, but a composite word, todah shlomov, the thanksgiving peace offering, one offering which it seems performs both functions. So let's have a look at the Rashis for these first three verses. No Rashis on the first verse. Verse 11 is quite straightforward when it just tells you we're now going to explain, the Torah says we're now going to explain what the laws of this Thanksgiving peace offering is. But on verse 12, Im al Toda Yakrivenu, if he offers this Shlomim, this peace offering for a Thanksgiving offering. So Rashi clarifies that we're talking about one offering, not more than one. Im al Devar Hoda'ah, if he's bringing this Shlomim, if he's bringing this peace offering because he's got something to be thankful for. What are the sort of things that we're thankful for that lead us to bring a Thanksgiving offering? You could go Yodei Hayam, somebody who traversed the seas, he went down to the sea in a ship, and he had a successful voyage over the sea. V'holchei midbaros, or he journeyed through a desert or a wilderness. V'chavushe beis ha'asurim, he was released. He had been confined and was then released from a prison. V'chole shenispa rapei, or a sick person who recovered from their sickness. Shehein tzrichim lahodos. These are the people who are obliged to bring a thanksgiving offering. They're obliged to give thanks to God in a ritual way. And that makes sense because in ancient times, the most dangerous form of activity was travel across the sea or across a desert which A, had no natural resources, and B, was full of dangerous people. If you want to read, by the way, a very interesting and relatively recent account of traversing a wilderness, read Arabian Sands by Wilfred Thesiger, who went across the empty quarter of Arabia in the late 1940s before it disappeared really as a wilderness in the classical sense, but at least 70 years ago this was still a real concern, and it was full of thieves and brigands and bandits, some of whom he actually linked up with. So if you travelled by sea, which was dangerous, if you travelled through the desert, which was dangerous, if you were in prison, which was a dangerous place to be in terms of violence and sickness in prison, and if you were just ill and you got better from your sickness, you are required in those circumstances to make ritual thanksgiving to God, done in temple times through this thanksgiving sacrifice. And Rashi finds a verse in the Psalms which explains this, or which implies this obligation. Shekosel behem, because it says in Psalms, Yodel Hashem chasto, let them give thanks to the Lord for his kindness, v'niflo sav livnei adam, and his wonders for the children of men, v'yizbechu zivchei soda, and let them offer up sacrifices of thanksgiving. So the verse in Psalm says, don't just give thanks in a spontaneous way, give thanks through bringing an offering. Now, of course, the Psalms were written much later than the Torah, so we can't say that the origin of this obligation is the Psalms, but the Psalms are recording or reflecting what was a known obligation, that when you had a matter to give thanksgiving, you would bring a sacrifice in the temple. The Psalms, by the way, were written often to be part of the temple service, so it's very appropriate. Vim al achas me'ela nadar shlomim halalu, and if he vowed to bring a shlomim, which we now understand to be, we now understand the toda, the thanksgiving offering, to be a subset of the shlomim, it's a type of shlomim, shamei toda hein, then these are this composite offering, shamei toda, both a shlomim and a toda, both a peace offering or a complete offering and a thanksgiving offering. Utaonos lechem ha'amor ba'inyan, and they require a bread to be brought with them, as the verse described. One doesn't just bring an animal to bring this thanksgiving offering, you also bring different types of bread, which are stated in this section. Ve'ein ne'echalin ela liyom v'layla k'moshe meforash kan. And these have to be eaten only during that day and night, as is explained here. So what Rashi is telling us is that other types of shlomim, other types of peace offering, you have in fact 2 days to eat them. The 2 days after they're brought from the temple as a sacrifice, you take them home and you eat them. But the thanksgiving sacrifice must be offered and then eaten in a day and a night. There's a much shorter time period. So although a toda is a type of shlomim, it has different regulations. Now, before we go further, I just want to bring the contemporary relevance of the korban toda, the thanksgiving offering, because although we don't have a temple and sacrifices, there are remnants of this practice of making a ritual thanksgiving action which are still pertinent today. For a start, we have Mizmor Latoda, we have the Psalm of Thanksgiving, which in fact appears in the weekday service, and which was recited at the time when the Thanksgiving offering was offered. So I just read you the English of a Psalm of Thanksgiving, which is as follows. A Psalm of Thanksgiving. This is Psalm 100. Shout joyously to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with joy. Come before him with jubilation. Know that the Lord is God. He made us and we are his. We are his people and the flock he tends. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, his courts with praise. Now the gates and the courts, of course, the gates and the courts of the temple, which the person bringing the sacrifice has just entered with joy that he's recovered from sickness or he's had a successful journey, whatever it might be. Thank him and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his loving kindness is everlasting, and his faithfulness is for every generation. They're the beautiful words which would accompany this act of giving the korban toda, the thanksgiving sacrifice. We also have a blessing, which takes the place of the thanksgiving sacrifice these days, which is known as Birkat HaGomel, and it's said in a minyan, often said after an Aliyah to the Torah. Women also say it after recovery from childbirth. And this takes the ritual place of the sacrifice, and the bracha goes, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hagomel lechayvim tovot. We thank God who bestows good on those who aren't really worthy of God's kindness, shegamalani kol tov, and has bestowed much good upon me. So we discharge the same obligation that was carried out by the sacrifice through that blessing, and by the way, for the same four purposes. You cross a desert, you cross the sea, you're released from prison, or you get better from a sickness. That's when you recite the Birkat HaGomel. That raises the very important question in Australia. If you were to fly from Sydney to Perth, you're of course traversing a desert. So that would oblige you in reciting the Birkat HaGomel. Very good. On we go. Now, let's have a bit more of a look at the types of bread, of loaves that we bring with the Thanksgiving sacrifice. V'ikriv al zevach hatodah, then you shall offer with the Thanksgiving sacrifice arba minei lechem, 4 types of bread. You bring 4 types of bread when you bring the Thanksgiving sacrifice. Chalos urakikin, they are loaves. I mean, now these are obviously matzahs, but they're complete pieces of matzah, like hand-baked matzah, urakikin and wafers, uravucha cakes that have been soaked with oil. That's what a ravucha is. It's a cake soaked with oil. And these are shlosha minei matzah. These are 3 types of matzah. Uksiv, but then it says in the next verse we just read, al chalos lechem chametz. You also bring them with chametz. So you've got 3 types of matzah, 3 types of unleavened bread, and 1 type of leavened bread. V'chol min v'min eser chalos. In each type you bring 10. So you're bringing in total 40 loaves, 30 types of matzah, and 10 types of regular bread, regular chametz bread. Kach mufarash b'menachos, and this is all described in the tractate called Menachot. A mincha, which is the word we use for the afternoon service, is a type of meal offering, type of grain offering. These are all grain offerings, these types of bread or matzah. And that whole tractate in the Talmud is a description of the laws and regulations around offerings made out of grain or flour. Now this interesting word, murbeches, this fine flour, which is murbeches. So this is lechem chalut berotkin kol tzorko. This is bread which is scalded by with boiling water, thoroughly scalded in boiling water. Sounds a bit like bagels which are of course boiled before they are baked. So we're talking about a type of bagel, I suppose, without the hole necessarily, which I suppose gave it that distinctive taste and shiny appearance. And now pressing on to the next verse. So Yaakov Korbono al Zevach. Now this is an interesting redundancy. We're very alert to words which aren't apparently necessary in the verse. So why did it just not say Yaakov al Zevach? He shall present it with the sacrifice. It says Yaakov Korbano. He shall present his offering with the sacrifice. So the tradition understands that this means that there's something different about the bread, which is makes it distinct in its regulations from the animal element of the sacrifices. So Rashi says, Magid, this is to tell you, Shein halechem kadosh, kedushas haguf, that the bread has a lower level of sanctity than the animal sacrifice itself. For example, lipasel biyotze, for example, if it leaves the temple courtyard, it doesn't become ritually impure. Utfo yom, or somebody who is ritually impure, if they touch it, that doesn't cause a problem. U milat seis the chulin bepidyon, it can be redeemed. You can exchange it for some other bread. You can say, I don't want to use these breads after all. I want to use those breads instead. That's all fine. There are just more lenient regulations when it comes to the bread. It can come into contact with things. It can go out of certain places. It can be exchanged without that causing any sort of a problem. Now, let's just pause for a second and think about the quantities involved. Huge quantities involved. We've got an entire animal, a sheep, let's say, which provides an awful lot of meat, and we've got now 40 loaves. This is a lot of food, and we've just been told you only got a day and a night to eat it. So vast quantities of food to be consumed in a very short time. Let's just bear that thought in mind as we carry on with these next couple of verses. So verse 14, V'ikriv mimenu echad mikol korban, and he shall present one from the sacrifice, truma lashem, as an offering to God, as a tithe really to God, lakohen, to the priest, ha zorek estam shlomim lo yiyeh. The person who performs the sprinkling of the blood of the sacrifice, he gets part of the sacrifice. So sometimes it's said cynically that temples were just places where the animal went in, brought by pious members of the general community, and then the priests duplicitously or surreptitiously gobbled it all up. But in fact, it's very, very above board that most of the animal and most of the bread that accompanies it is eaten by the person who brings it, and some explicitly is given to the priest as their due. That's how they lived. That's how they ate. So says Rashi, Echad mikol korban, one out of each offering, lechem echad mikol min v'min, yitol truma lekohen, ha'oved avodoso. They took one loaf from each of the 4 types. So you got one of the 3 types of matzah and one chometz regular bread loaf that was given to the priest. So you got 4 types of bread in total, one of each. V'hasha'ar nechal lebalim, and the rest was eaten by the owners. Uvasa lebalim, and also the owners get the whole of the animal, the whole of the meat. Chutz me chazek v'shok sheba kamoshim forish lemata, apart from the breast and the thigh, which was taken off for ritual purposes. Now this raises a very, very interesting and important point about the way in which the Torah was dealt with after the sacrifice. If you have to eat 36 loaves of different types, and you've got to eat an entire animal apart from the thigh and the breast, this is a vast amount of food, all to be consumed in a day and a night. In other words, you have to have a huge party. The only way to get through this amount of food in the limited period that's available to you, you have to have a vast party. And so Korban Todah, a thanksgiving offering, always led to a very big free meal for all the friends and the family of the person making thanks. And I think this was obviously a deliberate intention of the Torah, that when one gives thanks to God, this is not a private event, this is not a private endeavour. This is something you say to your family and friends: I'm really grateful for the deliverance I've enjoyed, I'm thankful to God, and I want you all to come with me and be with me to celebrate and enjoy it together. It becomes necessarily a very social and communal endeavour, an activity, and that's how it ought to be. Let's have a look at the final verse we're going to examine in this session. Uvesar zevach todas shlamav, and the flesh, the meat of the sacrifice of his peace offering, which is also a thanksgiving offering. B'yon korbano, on the day of his offering, ya'achel, it should be eaten. Lo yaniach mimenu ad boker, none of it should be left until the morning. As we've described, everything has to be eaten very quickly and efficiently. By the way, there is also a modern parallel to this big meal, which is called a Sudat Hoda'ah, a meal of thanksgiving. Obviously, it doesn't comprise ritual elements, sacrificial elements, but one has the tradition to make a big festive Thanksgiving meal if you are rescued from some major threat to your life, and you invite all your friends to communally celebrate and to give thanks to God. So Rashi says, and the meat of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving. Now, yesh kan rebum harba. There's many redundant words in this phrase. You didn't need all these different words. And the meat of the sacrifice, of his peace offering, of his thanksgiving offering. You could have edited down this verse very efficiently. So why are all these extra words present? To include other types of offering. We want to learn more rules about different offerings from this one verse, and that's why the extra words are there. So to include a sin offering and a guilt offering, and the ram that a Nazir brings. So you recall that Samson was a Nazir, didn't drink wine, didn't cut his hair. So at the end of the period of Nazirut, they also bring an offering, a ram. The Chagigat Arba Asa, and also the Chagiga, the festival offering, which is brought on the 14th day. The 14th day of what month? Of Nisan. The 14th day of this month. That is the Chagiga, which is eaten on Seder night, which is why this is all terribly relevant for this time of year, because on Seder night, we often think of the Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, and that was eaten, of course, on Seder night, but the idea was to eat the Pesach, eat the Paschal Lamb, with a sense of luxury and nobility and even royalty, and they always have full stomachs. So the idea was you would only start eating the Pesach when you were already quite full, so you would also bring a Chagiga, a festival offering, and you'd offer that up, you'd sacrifice that animal, you'd eat that to most of the evening, and when you were pleasantly but not excessively full, you would then turn to the Pesach. So this Chagiga of Erev Pesach, eaten on Seder night before the Pesach itself, this is also a type of Shlomim, and we learn laws from these passages about that sacrifice. Sheyu ne'echalim leyom v'layla, because just like this Thanksgiving offering, all of these sacrifices also had a limited time period, only a day and a night. B'yom korbano yachel, on the day of its offering it should be eaten. Uchizman b'sara zman lachma. You only have the same period to eat the bread as you have to eat the meat. So you don't have long to eat the bread. Lots and lots of hamburgers and buns had to be eaten that very night, that night and that day. You can't eat any of it until the morning. You can eat it all the way through the night, and that means until dawn. You have until dawn to eat all of this food. But why did the rabbis come along and say you've got to eat it by midnight? And on Seder night we try and eat the afikomen, which symbolises the Paschal Lamb, before midnight, because the rabbis made an earlier deadline in order to distance a person from sin. So if we said to you, okay, go ahead and eat it all night, it might be that you tarried a little, and by the time morning came you weren't quite finished. If we say eat it all by midnight, and you slightly misjudge, then at least there's plenty of night. You've got a lot of buffer room, a lot of wiggle room, which is going to prevent you getting into real trouble and transgressing Torah law. This is true, by the way, about the Shema in the evening, that we have really all night to say the Shema, but the rabbis say it before midnight to avoid getting into trouble, to distance a person from making a transgression in error. Now, I said at the beginning that this is very relevant to this time of year, and we've already seen how the Chagiga, the sacrifice brought before the Pesach and eaten on Seder night before the Pesach, is a type of Shlomim. But in fact, the connection is even stronger than that, because the Pesach itself is a strange type of modified Todah. A Todah is a Thanksgiving sacrifice. One of the reasons you bring the Todah is when you are released from prison. The ultimate release from prison in our Jewish history was release from Egypt. And what do? We bring a lamb, which would be suitable for a shlomim or a todah, or a goat. We bring one of those animals. We eat it with matzah, just like the todah we eaten with different types of matzah and chometz, but certainly types of matzah, and it has to be eaten in one night. So this very, very tight restriction on the eating period applies to the Pesach. So what we see in this discussion of the Todah is it applies the whole year round. It applies to any sort of occasion when you should give thanks to God, but it's becoming apparent that the Pesach, this unique one-time-a-year sacrifice, the Paschal Lamb, is a peculiar subset of the Torah, which shares many of its characteristics. Thank you very much, and join me on Thursday for Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 4, and next week for more Rashi on the next parsha. Wishing everyone good health and a good week.